My mother claimed she forgot to invite me to Christmas because my wife looked too poor for the relatives. I did not argue. I just silently withdrew from everything she thought I relied on. 3 weeks later, she walked into a bank and stared at $10 million on the screen in front of her. She froze, realizing the poor one in this story was not my wife, and the worst part was that the money was only the beginning. My name is Belinda Ashford. I have spent the last 15 years of my life believing that competence was the currency of affection. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I fixed enough problems, and if I kept the family business profitable while my brother played golf, I would eventually earn my seat at the table. I was wrong. I was 38 years old when I realized that to my mother, I was not a daughter. I was an employee who had overstayed her welcome. It was 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve. The heating vent in our small 2-bedroom rental was rattling, a comforting, rhythmic clank that usually made me feel safe. My wife, Tessa Caldwell, was in the kitchen. She was humming something off-key, smelling like cinnamon and cheap vanilla extract. We were not wealthy, we were comfortable, but we lived within our means. Tessa was a substitute teacher who spent her extra money on books and art supplies for her students. She wore flannel shirts she bought secondhand because she liked how soft they felt. She cut her own hair. She was the most genuine person I had ever known. And I loved the life we had built together. It was quiet. It was ours. I was sitting on the beige sofa we had bought from a neighbor, scrolling through my phone while waiting for the oven timer to ding. I did not expect to see the photograph. It popped up at the top of my feed, posted just 12 minutes prior by my mother, Darlene Ashford. The caption read, "Family is the greatest gift of all. Merry Christmas from the Ashfords." I stared at the screen. The image was high resolution, likely taken by a professional photographer, or at least someone with a very expensive camera. They were gathered in the grand foyer of my childhood home, the house that Northlake Fleet and Equipment Services had paid for. The staircase was draped in fresh garland and white lights. My mother sat in the center on a velvet chair, wearing a red silk dress that probably cost more than my car. My brother, Grant, stood behind her, one hand resting possessively on the back of her chair, looking every inch the golden heir in his tailored blazer. His wife, Marissa, was next to him, holding their toddler, both of them dressed in matching designer holiday outfits. And then there were the others, my Aunt Carol, Uncle Robert, cousins I had not spoken to in 3 years. Even the neighbors from down the street were visible in the background, holding glasses of champagne. Everyone was there, except me. I refreshed the page, thinking perhaps this was an old photo. It was not. The date stamp was today. The comments were already rolling in, praising Darlene for her beautiful family and her gracious hosting. My stomach turned over. A cold, heavy sensation that had nothing to do with hunger. I had assumed, foolishly, that the family was not doing a big gathering this year. When I spoke to my mother 2 weeks ago, she had mentioned she was tired. She had said she wanted a quiet holiday. I had believed her. I looked toward the kitchen. Tessa was pulling a tray of cookies out of the oven, her face flushed from the heat, smiling at nothing in particular. She looked happy. She thought we were having a quiet Christmas because we chose to, not because we were discarded. I stood up and walked into the hallway, closing the door softly behind me. I needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear the excuse. I dialed my mother's number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. The background noise was deafening laughter, clinking glass, and jazz music. "Hello?" Her voice was breathless, high-pitched with the adrenaline of being the center of attention. "Merry Christmas, Mother," I said. My voice sounded flat, even to my own ears. "Belinda," she shouted over the noise. "Oh, Merry Christmas, sweetie. Hold on. Let me step into the pantry. It is a madhouse here." I waited. The noise dampened slightly as she closed the door. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone shifting to that performative concern she used whenever she thought I might ask for something. "I saw the photo," I said. I did not offer pleasantries. "The one on Facebook. It looks like quite the party." There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence where I could hear her breathing. A normal mother might have panicked. A normal mother might have apologized profusely for the oversight. Darlene Ashford was not a normal mother. She was a woman who viewed social dynamics as a contact sport. "Oh, that," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Yes, well, it was a last-minute thing, really. Everyone just sort of showed up." "You have a caterer, Mother," I said, pointing out the obvious detail I had spotted in the corner of the frame. "And a photographer. You do not hire a photographer for a surprise drop-in," she sighed, the sound of a martyr being forced to explain simple concepts to a dull child. "Belinda, do not be dramatic. It is Christmas. I did not want to bother you. I know how busy you are with your life." "My life?" I repeated. "You mean my life running your company?" "I was at the office until 8 o'clock last night approving the payroll so Grant could have his bonus check cleared before the holiday." "Lower your voice," she snapped. "This is exactly why I did not call. You are always so intense." "Why wasn't I invited, Mother?" "Just tell me the truth." "You know why," she said. The sweetness was gone now, replaced by the cold steel that lived beneath her southern charm. "It is just complicated." "What is complicated about inviting your daughter to Christmas dinner?" "It is not you, Belinda. It is the whole package." She hesitated, but only for a second. "It is Tessa." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What about Tessa?" "She is a sweet girl, really," Darlene said, in a tone that suggested Tessa was anything but. "But frankly, Belinda, she does not fit in. Last Thanksgiving, she wore those dreadful boots, and she drove that rusted truck into the driveway right next to Uncle Robert's Mercedes. It makes people uncomfortable." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "You are ashamed of her." "I am protecting the family image," she corrected me, as if she were doing me a favor. "Tonight is important. We have investors here, people from the country club. I could not have Tessa sitting there looking like she just walked off a farm. She looks too poor. Belinda, I did not want the aunts and uncles gossiping about how low you have settled. It is embarrassing." The words hung in the air between us. She looks too poor. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a memory lapse. It was a calculation. My mother had weighed the visual aesthetic of her holiday party against her relationship with her daughter, and the aesthetic had won. She was worried that my wife's lack of designer labels would tarnish the tableau of wealth she had carefully constructed. "You are unbelievable," I whispered. "Oh, stop it," she said dismissively. "We will do something private next week. Just the immediate family. You can come over for brunch. Do not bring Tessa. We will have a nice, quiet time." "Okay, I have to go." The mayor just walked in. The line went dead. I stood in the dark hallway for a long time. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a slow, thudding rhythm of absolute rage. It was not the heat of anger. It was the cold clarity of betrayal. She had not just insulted my wife. She had confirmed everything I had spent 3 decades trying to ignore. I was a convenient child. I was the one who fixed the servers when they crashed. I was the one who smoothed over the contracts when Grant offended a client. I was the machinery that kept the Ashford life running. But I was not polished enough to be put on display. I turned around. Tessa was standing at the end of the hallway. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had heard. The walls in this rental were thin, and the hallway echoed. I saw the look on her face, not sadness, not shock, just a quiet, resigned understanding. "I am sorry," I said, my voice cracking. "I am so sorry. Tessa." She walked over to me. She was wearing a faded gray sweatshirt with a paint stain on the cuff. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was warm and rough from her work in the classroom. "Do not apologize for her," Tessa said softly. "She said—" I could not repeat it. "I heard what she said," Tessa interrupted gently. She looked me in the eye, her gaze steady and devoid of the shame my mother wanted her to feel. "Belinda, listen to me. If they are ashamed of me, They will never be proud of you." The truth of it hit me harder than the insult had. Tessa was right. My mother's rejection of Tessa was not about money. It was about control. It was about the fact that I had chosen someone who did not worship at the altar of the Ashford reputation. Tessa did not care about the country club. She did not care about the brand of car in the driveway. She cared about whether I was happy. And that made her dangerous to a woman like Darlene. "I am not going to brunch next week," I said. "I know," Tessa said. She squeezed my hand. "Come eat cookies. They are still warm." She led me back into the living room, back to the warmth and the smell of vanilla. But something in me had shifted. The bridge had been burned. I sat down on the sofa. But I did not pick up a cookie. I picked up my laptop. "What are you doing?" Tessa asked, sitting down beside me. "I am checking something," I said. I opened the laptop and logged into the secure server of Northlake Fleet and Equipment Services. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I had built this system. I had customized the database. I knew every username, every password, and every line of code. I navigated to the contracts folder. Northlake was a service company. We maintained heavy machinery and vehicle fleets for logistics companies and construction firms across the state. My mother owned the company on paper. Grant held the title of Vice President of Operations, a role that involved taking clients to lunch and signing papers I put in front of him. But the relationships were mine. I pulled up the file for Blue Ridge Logistics. They were our biggest client, accounting for 40% of our annual revenue. I scrolled down to the signature line on the service level agreement. It was up for renewal in 18 days. I opened the maintenance schedule for the next quarter. I saw the complex web of logistics required to service 300 trucks without disrupting their supply chain. It was a puzzle that only I knew how to solve. Grant did not know the difference between a transmission fluid change and a differential overhaul. He did not know that the fleet manager at Blue Ridge, a man named Saracen, only returned calls between 6 and 7 in the morning. He did not know that we were operating on a razor-thin margin for the municipal contract because I had negotiated a bulk discount on parts that expired on the 1st of January. My mother thought I was a worker bee. She thought I was a necessary, boring appliance that would always be there to keep the lights on while she and Grant basked in the glow. She thought she could hide me away when company came over, and then pull me out of the closet when the bills needed to be paid. She thought I was trapped. She thought I needed the salary, the approval, the connection. I looked at the family Christmas Eve photo one more time. I looked at Grant's smug smile. I looked at the way my mother held court, confident that her world was secure. She had forgotten one crucial detail. The person who builds the castle knows exactly where the structural supports are, and the person who builds the castle knows exactly which stone to pull to bring the whole thing down. "Belinda," Tessa whispered. I looked at my wife. She was everything they were not. She was real. She was kind. And she had been insulted for the crime of being authentic. "They think I am safe," I said quietly. "They think I will take it because I always have." I closed the Blue Ridge Logistics file. Then I opened my personal email and began to draft a new message. I have not sent it yet. I just needed to see the words on the screen. I looked at the calendar. The renewal date for the big contract was January 15th. The bank loan for the new facility, the one my mother had leveraged the house for, required a debt service coverage ratio that relied entirely on that contract being renewed. "If Mother thinks I do not belong at Christmas," I said to Tessa, my voice steady and cold, "then I do not belong at their company." I shut the laptop with a snap. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "What are you going to do?" Tessa asked. "I am going to give her exactly what she wants," I said. "She wants a Christmas without me. Fine. She is going to get a New Year without me too. And she is going to get company without me." I reached for a cookie and took a bite. It was sweet, but all I could taste was iron. "Merry Christmas, Tessa," I said. "Merry Christmas, Belinda," she replied. We sat there in silence, the ghost of my mother's insult hanging in the air. But the hurt was already turning into something else. It was hardening. It was becoming fuel. I looked at the phone again. Another notification popped up. Grant had commented on the photo, "Great night with the people who matter most." I smiled. It was a terrifying sensation. They had no idea what they had just started. My mother saw a bank balance of 0 when she looked at Tessa, but she had never bothered to look at my value. She was about to learn that while Tessa might look poor to the country club set, losing me was going to cost them everything. I put the phone face down on the table. The game had changed. I was done playing by their rules. I was done waiting for an invitation to a table I had paid for. The holidays are over. It was time to get to work. To understand why a photograph on Facebook could sever a relationship of 38 years, you have to understand the architecture of the Ashford family. It was not a structure built on hatred. Hatred would have been easier to process. Hatred is loud and distinct. Our family was built on a quiet, suffocating indifference that only applied to one half of the children. I was the daughter who made sense. Grant was the son who made magic. This dynamic did not start when we were adults. It began the moment Grant was born. He was 2 years older than me, but he was always the baby. He had golden hair and a smile that could disarm a traffic cop. My mother treated him like a fragile piece of porcelain that the world was constantly threatening to crack. I, on the other hand, was treated like a wrench. I was sturdy. I was reliable. I was kept in the drawer until something started leaking, and then I was put back away when the job was done. There is a specific memory that plays in my head whenever Darlene talks about family values. I was 17 years old. I had spent 6 months rebuilding a vintage engine for the state industrial arts competition. It was not a feminine hobby, and my mother made sure to tell me that every time she saw grease under my fingernails, she would sigh and hand me a lemon wedge to scrub my skin, looking at me with a mixture of pity and distaste. But I was good at it. I was better than good. I won the regional title and was going to the state finals in Nashville. It was the first time I felt like I had carved out something that was entirely mine, something that did not rely on being an Ashford. The morning of the ceremony, I stood in the foyer in my pressed slacks and button-down shirt, holding my plaque. The car was running in the driveway. Darlene was supposed to drive me. I waited for 20 minutes, then 30. When she finally came down the stairs, she was still in her bathrobe. She did not look at me. She looked at the floor, wringing her hands. "Grant is having a crisis," she said softly. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. "What happened? Is he hurt?" "He broke up with Tiffany," she said. Her voice was trembling with genuine empathy, an empathy she never wasted on me. "He is devastated. Belinda, he cannot stop crying. I cannot leave him here alone in this state." I stared at her. "Mom, it is the state finals. I am accepting the first-place trophy." "I know, honey," she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were dry. "But you are strong. You can handle driving yourself. Can you not? You are always so capable. Grant needs me right now. You do not need me." She turned around and walked back up the stairs to comfort her 19-year-old son over a high school romance, leaving me standing there with my car keys. I drove 2 hours to Nashville alone. I walked across the stage alone. When I looked out into the audience, I saw other parents cheering and holding up cameras. I saw empty seats where mine should have been. That was the lesson, etched into me before I was even a legal adult. Being capable was not a point of pride. It was a punishment. If you were strong, you did not get support. If you were useful, you did not get love. You just got more work. Grant, meanwhile, failed his college classes 3 times. Each time, Darlene framed it as the professor being unfair or the curriculum being too rigid for his creative mind. When he crashed his car while driving under the influence, Darlene paid off the other driver and told the neighbors it was a deer. She smoothed the road for him so aggressively that he never learned how to walk on rough terrain. And because he never learned, I had to walk it for him. When I entered the family business, I told myself it was for the legacy, but deep down, I knew the truth. I was trying to buy her attention. I thought if I made enough money, if I solved enough crises, if I covered for Grant's incompetence enough times, she would finally look at me the way she looked at him, I wanted her to look at me with that soft, terrified adoration. I wanted her to worry about me, but you cannot buy what is not for sale. Then I met Tessa. It was 5 years ago. I was 33, exhausted, and sitting in a diner at 10 o'clock at night, reviewing invoices. Tessa was not a waitress. She was the customer in the booth opposite mine. She was grading papers. A stack of colorful drawings spread out on the formica table. She had messy brown hair and wore a sweater that had clearly seen better days. I had dropped my pen. It rolled under her table. When we both ducked to grab it, we bumped heads. It was a clumsy, uncinematic moment. But when she laughed, something in my chest loosened. Tessa did not know who the Ashfords were. She did not know about the fleet contracts or the country club membership. She just saw a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes who looked like she needed a decaf coffee. We talked for 3 hours that night. For the first time in my life, I was speaking to someone who was listening to me, not to check if I had completed a task. Tessa was simple in the most beautiful way. She believed in honesty. She believed that if you said you would be there, you showed up. She did not care about optics. When I told her about my family, she did not look impressed by their wealth. She looked sad for my loneliness. "You work very hard for people who do not clap when you finish," she had said to me after our 3rd date. When I came out to my mother, the reaction was exactly what I expected. It was not a screaming match. Darlene Ashford did not scream. She froze. We were sitting on the patio, drinking iced tea. I told her I was in love with a woman named Tessa. Darlene set her glass down on the coaster with a sharp click. She looked at the garden, avoiding my eyes. "Well," she said, "I suppose that is your business." "I want you to meet her," I said. "Is that necessary?" she asked. "I mean, we do not need to make a production out of it, do we? As long as you are happy. Belinda, I do not see why we need to parade it around." She tolerated Tessa. That was the word. Tolerated. When Grant married Marissa, a woman who had never worked a day in her life but knew exactly which fork to use for the salad, Darlene threw a wedding that cost more than the gross domestic product of a small nation. There were 300 guests. There were fireworks. When Tessa and I got married at the courthouse, Darlene sent a card. She did not come. She said she had a headache. The divide deepened when Marissa got pregnant. The moment Grant gave Darlene a grandson, the hierarchy was cemented in concrete. The baby was the golden ticket. Grant was no longer just the favorite son. He was the father of the future. Marissa became the sacred vessel. And I became the aunt who sent checks. I tried to ignore the slights. I tried to ignore the way Darlene would coo over Marissa's struggles with a nanny. While ignoring the fact that I was working 80-hour weeks to pay for that nanny, I swallowed the insults because I thought we were still a team. I thought that even if she did not love me the same way, she respected me. I thought she knew that I was the engine, but the Christmas forgetting was different. It was not just about the party. As I sat in the darkness of my living room, replaying the years of neglect, I realized the terrifying pattern. Darlene did not just forget me because she was busy. She forgot me because she was ashamed of what I represented. I represented the work. I represented the grease under the fingernails. I represented the reality of how the money was made, while Grant and Marissa represented the fantasy of how the money was spent. And Tessa was the mirror. Tessa, with her second-hand clothes and her honest eyes, reflected the one thing Darlene terrified of most: mediocrity. My mother looked at my wife and saw poverty. She saw a lack of ambition. She saw someone who would lower the property value of the family portrait. But as I sat there, anger cooling into a hard, dense resolve, I realized something else. Darlene had mentioned a meeting with the estate attorney 3 months ago. At the time, she said it was just routine maintenance for the trust. I had offered to go, but she had waved me off, saying Grant would handle it. I had laughed internally, knowing Grant would not understand a word of the legalese, but I had let it go. Now, the pieces were clicking together. The exclusion from the Christmas photo, the comments about Tessa being too poor, The sudden push for Grant to be the face of the company in the local magazine spread last month. They were not just being mean, they were rebranding. They were scrubbing the image of the company to match the social aspirations of the mother. They wanted the Ashford name to mean old money, leisure, and effortless success. They did not want the daughter who wore work boots to the site inspections. They did not want the lesbian wife who drove a truck. They were erasing me. "She thinks this is just a social snub," I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the neighbors had their Christmas lights on. It looked peaceful. It looked normal. But inside my head, the landscape was shifting violently. My mother thought she could shame me into hiding. She thought she could put me in the back room of the family life, just like she kept me in the back room of the business, and that I would stay there because I craved her approval. She thought the worst thing she could do to me was not invite me to a party. She was wrong. The snub was painful. Yes. It tore at the little girl inside me who still waited in the foyer with a trophy, hoping her mother would come down the stairs. But the adult woman, the woman who had built a $10 million fortune in assets, she had never bothered to mention to her mother, saw something far more dangerous. This was not just an insult. This was an eviction notice. If they were comfortable cutting me out of the picture, they were preparing to cut me out of the future. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. "You have no idea what you have done, Mother," I said softly. The memory of her voice saying she looks too poor played in my mind one last time. It would be the last time I let it hurt me. From this moment on, I would not use it as a source of pain. I would use it as a weapon. I turned away from the window. The sadness was gone. In its place was the cold, efficient calculation of a mechanic looking at a broken machine and deciding that it was no longer worth fixing. Sometimes, you do not repair the engine. Sometimes, you strip it for parts and sell the scrap. I was done being the daughter who waited. It was time to become the vendor who collected. Northlake Fleet and Equipment Services was not the kind of business that made for polite dinner conversation at the country club. It was a business of grease, diesel, hydraulic fluid, and the relentless, grinding noise of impact wrenches. We kept the trucks running that delivered food to grocery stores and materials to construction sites. It was unglamorous, dirty, and thanks to me, incredibly profitable to the outside world. Northlake was Darlene Ashford's triumph. She was the widow who had taken over her husband's small shop and kept it alive. That was the narrative she sold to the local Chamber of Commerce. In her version of the story, she was the matriarchal genius, and my brother Grant was the visionary heir apparent, bringing modern sophistication to a blue-collar industry. The reality was a spreadsheet that only I knew how to read. When I formally joined the company 12 years ago, Northlake was bleeding cash. The inventory system was a stack of handwritten notes impaled on a metal spike. Invoices were sent out weeks late. Mechanics were stealing parts because nobody was tracking the stockroom. My mother was too busy attending luncheons to notice that her profit margin was being eaten alive by inefficiency. I did not just step in, I rebuilt the engine while the car was moving. I implemented a digital inventory tracking system that reduced loss by 18% in the first year. I renegotiated our supplier contracts, locking in prices for oil and filters that saved us $40,000 annually. I created a preventative maintenance schedule that predicted breakdowns before they happened, a service that allowed us to charge a premium because we could guarantee uptime for our clients. I did not do this from a corner office. I did it from a desk sandwiched between the break room and the parts cage, listening to the crude jokes of the mechanics and the constant ringing of the phone. While I was doing this, Grant was usually on the golf course. Grant's official title was Vice President of Business Development. In theory, this meant he was responsible for finding new clients. In practice, it meant he ate 3 lunches a week and occasionally showed up to the office to complain about the quality of the coffee. 2 days after Christmas, 2 days after the photo that confirmed my exclusion from the family, I was at my desk at 6:30 in the morning. The office was cold. The cleaners had not come yet, and the air smelled of stale coffee and industrial solvent. I was reviewing the end-of-year financials. The numbers were good. We were up 12% over the previous fiscal year. largely due to the expansion of the Blue Ridge logistics contract. My phone rang. It was Mike Saracen, the regional director for Blue Ridge. "Belinda," he barked, skipping the pleasantries. "I have a truck down on Interstate 40. The driver says the transmission is shot. That rig is hauling frozen seafood. If I lose that cargo, I am out 50 grand. "Truck number?" I asked, already typing. 409. "I see it," I said, pulling up the GPS data and the maintenance log. "It is not the transmission. Mike, that unit has a sensor glitch that trips the limp mode. Tell your driver to cycle the ignition 3 times and hold the override switch. It will clear the fault code and get him to the depot." There was a pause, and then I heard him relaying the instructions over his other line. A moment later, he came back. "He is rolling. You are a lifesaver. Belle, seriously, I don't know what I would do if I had to deal with anyone else over there." "Happy to help, Mike," I said. "Hey, are we still on for the renewal meeting next week?" he asked. "I want to lock in that tiered pricing we talked about." "Absolutely," I said. "I will have the paperwork ready." I hung up. That was the job. It was not about handshakes or expensive suits. It was about knowing that Truck 409 had a faulty sensor and saving a client $50,000 in 30 seconds. At 10 o'clock, Grant strolled in. He was wearing a camel-colored cashmere coat and a scarf that looked like it had been tied by a stylist. He held a cup of artisan coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He stopped at the door of my office, leaning against the frame with that relaxed, unearned confidence that always made my teeth grind. "Morning, Belle," he said. "The place smells like a locker room today. We really need to look into better ventilation." "We are a diesel shop, Grant," I said without looking up. "It smells like money." He chuckled, a dismissive sound. "Right. Listen, Mom wanted me to check in on the quarterly numbers. She is worried about the overhead on the new diagnostic machines." I stopped typing and looked at him. "Those machines cut our turnaround time by 4 hours per truck. They paid for themselves in 3 months. I sent her the report last week." "Yeah, well, you know Darlene," Grant said, waving his hand vaguely. "She likes a summary, bullet points, keep it simple. She wants to make sure the cash flow is liquid enough for upcoming projects." "What projects?" I asked. Grant's eyes shifted. It was a subtle tick, a quick dart to the left that he had done since we were children whenever he was lying. "Oh, just some branding stuff, website updates, maybe a renovation of the front lobby. We need to elevate the image, Belle. Clients want to feel like they are working with a premium partner. Clients want their trucks to run." "Grant," I said, "Mike Saracen does not care about our lobby furniture. You have a very limited view of business," he said, shaking his head with pity. "That is why you are so good at the operational side. You keep the gears turning. Leave the vision to us." He tapped the doorframe twice and walked away. Whistling, I watched him go, a limited view. I had spent a decade sacrificing my personal life for this company. I had missed dates with Tessa. I had canceled my anniversary trips. I had worked through the flu, through my grandmother's funeral, through weekends and holidays, all because I believed that I was building equity. Every time I asked Darlene about formalizing my ownership stake, she would give me the same soft, maternal smile. "Don't worry, sweetie," she would say. "Everything goes to you and Grant eventually. We are family. We do not need lawyers to tell us how to share. Once the market stabilizes, we will sit down and do the paperwork." The market had stabilized 5 years ago. The paperwork never happened. I turned back to my computer. Grant's comment about liquid cash flow bothered me. We had plenty of cash. Unless Darlene was planning to drain it, I had administrator access to the entire network. I had set it up. After all, I decided to check the executive calendar. Usually, Darlene's schedule was filled with hair appointments, luncheons, and the occasional board meeting where she nodded at charts I had prepared. I logged into the Exchange server and pulled up her calendar for the next 2 weeks. There it was. January 4th, A 2-hour block marked simply strategic planning. It was not unusual for her to have meetings I did not attend. But when I clicked on the details, my heart stopped. Attendees: Darlene Ashford, Grant Ashford, Marissa Ashford. Location: the offices of Sterling Vance. Sterling Vance was not our corporate counsel. Our corporate lawyer was a man named Jim Henderson, whom I had worked with for years. Sterling Vance was a boutique firm that specialized in high net worth estate planning and asset protection, and Marissa was invited. My sister-in-law, whose only contribution to the business was choosing the color of the Christmas cards, was attending a strategic planning meeting at a law firm. I was not. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the server room suddenly sounding very loud. I dug deeper. I went into the document cache on the shared drive. Darlene was terrible with technology. She often saved email attachments to the root folder because she did not know how to file them. I sorted by date, found a PDF saved yesterday, Draft Resolution Jan 2026, PDF. I opened it. It was a draft agenda for the upcoming board meeting. Item 1, appointment of Grant Ashford as Chief Executive Officer. Item 2, restructuring of operational management roles. Item 3, transition of Northlake operations to retained consultant status. Retained consultant status, the words blurred on the screen. They were not just promoting Grant, they were demoting me. They were planning to strip me of my title, my authority, and my salary, and convert me into a contractor, a consultant they could fire at will, a consultant who would have no claim to the company's assets, no benefits, and no future. I scrolled down. There was a section on cost reduction. Eliminate redundancy in senior management salaries to improve net liquidity for executive distribution. They were cutting my salary to pay for Grant's raise. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a cold, sharp clarity. This was why I was not invited to Christmas. It was not just because Tessa wore cheap boots. It was because it is awkward to eat turkey across the table from the person you are planning to execute. They wanted to sever the emotional tie first. They wanted to make me feel small, unwanted, and isolated, so that when they dropped the professional hammer, I would already be broken. They expected me to beg. They expected me to scramble for whatever scraps of consulting work they threw my way because I needed the money. I looked around my office, the framed certificates on the wall, the stack of manuals I had written, the photo of me and Darlene at the company picnic 3 years ago, where she looked like a benevolent queen and I looked like her exhausted servant. I picked up the phone and dialed Tessa. "Hey," she answered on the first ring. "Everything okay?" "You were right," I said. My voice was steady, frighteningly so. "They are not just ashamed of me, Tessa. They are stealing from me." "What did you find?" "They are restructuring the company," I said. "Grant is becoming CEO. They are demoting me to a consultant. They are going to cut me out of the equity completely." Tessa was silent for a moment. "When January 4th, I said. "That is the meeting with the lawyers." "That is 8 days from now," Tessa said. "Yes," I said. 8 days. I looked at the Blue Ridge Logistics file on my desk. The contract renewal was sitting right there, ready to be signed. It was worth $4 million over the next 3 years. It was the backbone of the company's credit rating, and it was waiting for my signature. "Belinda," Tessa said, her voice firm, "do not sign anything. Come home." "I am not going to sign anything," I said. "But I am not coming home yet. I have to clean out my desk." "You are quitting." "No," I said, watching Grant walk past my glass door, laughing into his phone. "Quitting implies I am giving up. I am not giving up. I am accelerating the timeline." I hung up the phone. My mother had told me afterwards, "We will figure it out." She had used my hope against me. She had used my need for validation to get 10 years of free labor and a thriving company. But she had made a critical error. She assumed that because I built the machine, I was part of the machine. She forgot that the architect owns the blueprints. If they wanted a transition, I would give them one. I reached for my hard drive. I began to back up my personal contacts, my proprietary spreadsheets, And the emails where Mike Saracen explicitly stated he only did business with Northlake because of me. Then, I opened the digital calendar and declined the recurring weekly meeting with Darlene. The cold open of my revenge had begun at Christmas, but the real war. The war started now. They wanted Grant to be the face of the company. Fine. Let's see how the face looks when the body stops moving. I clicked delete on the Blue Ridge renewal reminder. Good luck, Grant, I whispered. You are going to need it. The summons came 48 hours after the Facebook post. It was not an apology. Darlene Ashford did not apologize. It was a text message that arrived at 10 in the morning while I was reviewing the inventory logs for the third time. Stop by the house on your way home. We need to clear the air before New Year's. It was a command, masquerading as an invitation. I drove to the house in the early evening. The driveway was lined with freshly planted winter boxwoods, their leaves glossy and dark under the landscape lighting. The house itself looked like a Christmas card brought to life. A wreath the size of a tractor tire hung on the front door, adorned with gold ribbon that shimmered in the porch light. It was a beautiful facade. It was the kind of house that made people slow down as they drove past, whispering about how lucky the people inside must be. I parked my 10-year-old sedan next to Grant's brand-new luxury SUV. The contrast was so stark it was almost comical. His car was polished to a mirror shine. Mine had a layer of road dust and a back seat full of technical manuals. I let myself in. The air inside smelled of cinnamon brooms and expensive perfume. In the sunroom, Belinda, Darlene's voice floated down the hallway. I found her sitting in her favorite armchair, a cup of tea steaming on the small marble table beside her. She did not stand up to greet me. She just gestured to the empty chair opposite her, offering a tight, practiced smile. You look tired, she said. It was her standard opening gambit. It established that I was the one who was worn down, and she was the benevolent observer. It is the end of the quarter. Mother, I said, sitting down. I did not take off my coat. We are closing the books. Always working, she sighed, shaking her head. That is your father in you. He never knew when to stop, either. She took a sip of tea, her eyes watching me over the rim of the cup. I stayed silent. I had learned long ago that silence was the only weapon that worked against her. If I spoke, she would twist my words. If I stayed quiet, she had to fill the void. Look, she said, setting the cup down. I know you were upset about the Christmas Eve party. You were dramatic on the phone, but I understand. It hurts to feel left out. I was not dramatic, I said evenly. I was informed. Well, let's not split hairs, she said, waving a manicured hand. The point is, I wanted to make sure we are good. I do not want you sulking through January. It is bad for morale. I am not sulking. Good, she said. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You have to understand, Belinda, the holidays, they are about tradition. They are about presenting a certain image of stability. Your Uncle Robert, the investors from the bank, they have expectations. They want to see a traditional family unit. She paused, waiting for me to agree. When I didn't, she continued, her tone hardening just a fraction. You and Tessa, you live a different kind of life, and that is fine. It is your choice, but you have to be smart enough to know that it does not fit everywhere. When we have the big donors here, or the board members, we need things to look cohesive. Tessa is a lovely girl, I am sure, but she is rough around the edges. She does not know the social cues. It makes people tense. I looked at my mother. She was not talking about social cues. She was talking about control. She was talking about erasing anything that did not reflect glory back onto her. So, I said slowly, testing the waters, you excluded me to protect the family brand. I exercised discretion, she corrected. And frankly, if you were smart, you would not make a scene about it. You would understand that sometimes you have to take a back seat for the greater good. Grant understands that. Marissa understands that. Grant and Marissa were in the center of the photo, I pointed out, because they represent the future. She said simply, And they look the part. Now, are we done with this? Because I really need to know that you are focused. Grant tells me the Blue Ridge contract is up for renewal. We cannot afford any distractions right now. There it was, the pivot. She had summoned me here to slap me back into line, to make sure my hurt feelings would not interfere with the revenue stream. She needed to know if I was still the obedient workhorse. I forced my facial muscles to relax. I forced my shoulders to drop. I needed her to think she had won. I needed her to believe that I was just the same old Belinda who would swallow the insult and go back to the factory floor. I understand, Mother, I said. My voice was flat, submissive. You are right. Business comes first. She visibly relaxed. The tension left her jaw. She smiled, a genuine expression of relief that she did not have to expend any more energy managing me. That is my girl, she said. I knew you would be sensible. You always are. Why don't you take a tin of cookies home? Marissa made too many. I walked out of the house 5 minutes later, carrying a tin of stale cookies. I felt like I was covered in slime. She had not just insulted me, she had confirmed that my value was entirely conditional. As long as I was sensible and kept the money flowing, she would tolerate my existence. But I was not family. I was in infrastructure. When I got home, Tessa was sitting at the kitchen table, grading papers. She looked up as I walked in, tossing the cookie tin into the trash can with a loud clang. How was it? She asked. She told me that I need to know my place, I said, leaning against the counter. She said that excluding us was a business decision. She wants to make sure I'm still focused on the Blue Ridge contract. Tessa put down her red pen. And what did you say? I told her she was right. Tessa smiled, a sharp, knowing look in her eyes. Good. Let them think you are beaten. It makes them sloppy. They are already sloppy, I said. I pulled out my phone. Look at this. I opened Instagram. In the hour since I had left my mother's house, Marissa had posted a new series of photos. The first image was a close-up of a diamond bracelet wrapped around her wrist. The caption read, Grant knows exactly how to spoil me. So blessed to be part of this generous family. Ashford Legacy Christmas Miracle. The second photo was of their living room, filled with stacks of opened gifts, designer bags, high-end electronics, a miniature electric car for their toddler. It looked like a catalog for excess. My mother had commented on the post, You deserve every bit of it, darling. A beautiful mother for a beautiful grandson. It was a public display of wealth that bordered on vulgarity, but then I saw the notification at the top of my screen. A direct message from Marissa. I opened it. Hey, Belinda. The message read, I just wanted to check in. Darlene said you were feeling a bit down about the party. I totally get it. I know things must be tight for you and Tessa right now, especially with her teacher salary. If you guys need anything like leftover ham or some of the decorations we are tossing out, just let me know. We would love to help out the less fortunate branches of the family tree. XO. I stared at the screen. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive cruelty. She was framing their exclusion of us as an act of charity, assuming that because we lived simply, we must be destitute. She had no idea. Do not reply, Tessa said, reading over my shoulder. I am not going to, I said. I am going to check the books. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. The juxtaposition of Marissa's diamond bracelet and my mother's anxiety about the Blue Ridge contract did not add up. If they were so wealthy, why was Darlene so desperate for me to secure the renewal? I logged into the company's expense ledger. This time, I did not look at the operational costs. I looked at the owner draws and miscellaneous administrative expenses. I filtered the search for the last 12 months. The numbers that filled the screen were staggering. In February, there was a withdrawal of $40,000 labeled office renovation. I knew for a fact that the only renovation we had done was painting the break room, which cost $500. The date coincided perfectly with photos Darlene had posted of her new kitchen remodel at home. In June, a charge of $15,000 for client relations. Travel. The destination was listed as Cabo San Lucas. The only client we had in Cabo was non-existent. But Grant and Marissa had gone there for their anniversary. In October, a massive withdrawal of $60,000 labeled Consulting Retainer. I clicked on the vendor details. It was a shell company registered to an address that matched my Uncle Robert's vacation home. Darlene was using the company as her personal piggy bank. She was bleeding the operating capital to fund the Ashford legacy image she was so desperate to project. "They are broke," I whispered. "What?" Tessa asked. "They are cash poor," I said, turning the screen so she could see. "Look at this. They are pulling money out faster than we can make it. That is why they need the Blue Ridge contract so badly. They are not investing the profits. They are eating them. If they lose that contract, they cannot service the debt on these withdrawals." "So," Tessa said, leaning back in her chair, "they are not afraid of you because you are good at your job. They are afraid of you because you are the only thing standing between them and bankruptcy." "Exactly," I said. "They think they can push me into the background, demote me to a consultant, and cut my pay, but keep me doing the work that pays for their diamond bracelets." "They do not fear your competition," Tessa said, her voice quiet and powerful. "They fear your absence." It was the key that unlocked the entire strategy. For years, I had thought I needed to fight for my seat at the table. I thought I needed to prove I was better than Grant, but I did not need to fight them. I just needed to leave them. If I walked away, the machine would stop, and if the machine stopped, the cash flow stopped, and if the cash flow stopped, the diamonds, the house, and the proper family image would crumble into dust. I looked at Marissa's message again, the less fortunate branches of the family tree. She thought we were poor because we saved our money. She thought we were weak because we were quiet. She had no idea that while she was buying bracelets, I had been buying freedom. "I am not going to wait for the 4th of January, I said. "I am not going to wait for them to fire me." "What are you going to do?" Tessa asked. "I am going to protect myself," I said. "I am going to make sure that when I leave, I take everything that belongs to me. Not the money they can have empty accounts. I am taking the relationships. I am taking the reputation." I closed the laptop. The anger I had felt earlier was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sharp anticipation. "Tessa," I said, "get your coat. We are going out." "Where?" "To celebrate," I said. "We are celebrating the end of my employment." "But you haven't quit yet." "Mentally, I have," I said. "And tomorrow, I am making it official." I picked up my phone and made one call. It was not to Darlene. It was not to Grant. I dialed the number of a man named Marcus Thorne. He was the fiercest corporate attorney in the city, a man who specialized in intellectual property and executive severance. He was expensive, he was ruthless, and he was exactly what I needed. "Thorne and Associates." The answering service picked up. "This is Belinda Ashford," I said clearly. "I would like to schedule an emergency consultation with Mr. Thorne for tomorrow morning. I am planning to dissolve a business partnership, and I expect it to be hostile." "I will put you through to his scheduling assistant," the voice said. I looked at Tessa. She was smiling. The Ashfords wanted a traditional Christmas fine. I was about to give them a very traditional American experience, a lawsuit. The meeting on January 4th was not held at the company headquarters. It was held in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Sterling and Vance, a law firm that smelled of old leather and expensive cologne. Darlene sat at the head of the table. Grant sat to her right. A man I did not recognize, a senior partner named Mr. Sterling, sat to her left. I sat at the far end of the table, alone. There were water bottles on the table, the expensive glass kind, but no one offered me one. The atmosphere was not hostile. It was dangerously polite. It felt less like a business meeting and more like an intervention where the patient was perfectly healthy, but the family had decided to commit to her anyway. "Belinda," Darlene started, clasping her hands on top of a thick leather binder. "Thank you for coming. We have been doing a lot of thinking about the future of Northlake, about the legacy your father left us. I thought this was a strategic planning meeting," I said, keeping my voice neutral. It is, she nodded. But strategy requires structure, and as we look toward the next fiscal year, it has become clear that we need to realign our leadership roles to better reflect the public face of the company. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat and slid a document across the polished wood toward me. It was titled Organizational Restructuring Resolution. We are appointing Grant as the Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately, Darlene said. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. He will handle all external relations, banking partnerships, and the long-term vision. I looked at Grant. He was studying his fingernails. He could not even look me in the eye. And my role, I asked. You will continue to be invaluable, of course, Darlene said quickly, smiling as if she were offering me a gift. We are creating a new title for you, Director of Internal Logistics. You will keep doing exactly what you're doing now, managing the shop, the schedules, the inventory. You are so good at the messy parts. Belinda, we do not want to burden you with corporate governance. Director, I repeated. Not the vice president, not partner, director. Titles are just words, Grant muttered. Finally looking up, it is about the team, Belle. If titles are just words, then why do you need the CEO title so badly? I asked him. He flushed red but said nothing. It is not just about the title, Darlene interjected, her tone sharpening. It is about stability. Grant has a family to support. Belinda, he has Marissa, he has your nephew. He has a mortgage on a house that befits the leader of this company. He needs the salary and the position to maintain that stability. She paused, then delivered the line that severed the last thread of my loyalty. You, on the other hand, well, you and Tessa are so flexible. You have such a simple life. You do not have the same financial pressures. It makes sense for Grant to take the lead position. It is the responsible thing to do for the family. I stared at her. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You are basing the corporate hierarchy on his personal debt, I asked. You are giving him the company because he spends more money than I do. I am giving him company because he is the patriarch of the next generation, Darlene said coldly, dropping the mask of benevolence. And because, frankly, the bank prefers a traditional leadership structure. What about my equity? I asked. We discussed 20%. I have worked here for 12 years under that assumption. Darlene waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Belinda, do not be calculating. It is unbecoming. This is a family business. Everything I have goes to both of you eventually. Why do you need a piece of paper now? Do you not trust your own mother? I trust contracts, I said. And this document. I tapped the paper in front of me. Strips me of any executive authority. It turns me into an at-will employee. It frees you up to focus on your work, Darlene corrected. Just sign the acknowledgement, dear. We have a lunch reservation at the club to celebrate. I looked down at the paper. It was a demotion. It was a pay cut masked as a role adjustment. It was a declaration that my competence was useful, but my identity was a liability. They wanted me to stay in the engine room, shoveling coal, while Grant stood on the deck in a captain's hat, steering the ship into an iceberg. But as I looked at the legal jargon, I realized something. The document listed the assets of the company. It listed the physical trucks. It listed the building. It listed the cash accounts. It did not list the relationships. It did not list the fact that the suppliers gave us net 60 payment terms only because I had personally guaranteed them. It did not list the fact that the fleet managers called my personal cell phone, not the office line. It did not list the intellectual property of the workflow systems I had designed, systems that were never formally transferred to the company because Darlene had been too cheap to pay for the copyright filing 5 years ago. They were stealing the shell of the car, thinking they were stealing the engine. I closed the folder. I will not sign this, I said. Belinda, Darlene sighed, her patience fraying. Do not be difficult. We are doing this. I know you are, I said, but you will be doing it without me. I stood up. Sit down, Grant said, trying to sound authoritative but sounding petulant instead. No, I said. You want to be CEO. Grant, congratulations. You are the CEO. But I am not the director of internal logistics. I am resigning. Darlene laughed. It was a dry, incredulous sound. Oh, stop it. You are just emotional because of the Christmas thing. You are not going to quit. Where would you go? This is your whole life. It was my life, I said. Now it is just a job, and I am giving my notice. You cannot quit. Mr. Sterling spoke for the first time, looking over his spectacles. There are critical contracts up for renewal. Leaving now would be indistinguishable from sabotage. I am giving 2 weeks' notice, I said calmly. I will facilitate a professional handover. I will train Grant on the systems. I will leave the files in order. I will do everything by the book, but I am leaving. You will be back in 3 days, Darlene sneered. You do not have the stomach for the real world. Belinda, you need us. We will see, I said. I walked out of the conference room. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently, sealing them inside with their delusions. I went straight to my car, opened my laptop, and sent the email. I had drafted it the night before with the help of Marcus Thorne. It was short. It was polite. It stated my resignation effective January 18th. It was copied to HR, the legal department, and Darlene. Then I drove back to the office. For the next 2 weeks, I was a ghost. I arrived at 8 o'clock every morning. I organized the server files. I wrote detailed manuals on how to process invoices, how to schedule maintenance, and how to order parts. I labeled every key in the lockbox. Grant avoided me. He stayed in his office, presumably planning his new vision. Darlene stopped by twice, looking at me with a mixture of annoyance and pity. She clearly expected me to break down, apologize, and beg for my job back. When I continued to pack my personal belongings into cardboard boxes, she grew colder. You are making a mistake. She told me 3 days before my last day. You are walking away from your inheritance. I am walking away from your control, I replied. The staff was confused. The mechanics asked me if I was going on vacation. When I told them I was moving on, the head mechanic, a gruff man named Miller, looked at me with genuine panic. Who is going to approve the overtime? He asked. Grant does not know how to log into the payroll system. He will learn, I said. He is the CEO now, Miller snorted. God help us. On my final day, the office was quiet. I had cleared my desk. The photos of Tessa were gone. The certificates were gone. The only thing left was the computer monitor and the phone. I placed my keys on the desk. I had done exactly what I promised. I had left the company in perfect working order. If they failed now, it would not be because I sabotaged them. It would be because they did not know how to drive. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. The sun had set, and the parking lot lights were humming. I picked up my box of personal effects. My cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Mike Saracen from Blue Ridge Logistics. I hesitated. Technically, I was no longer an employee of Northlake, but the habit of answering the client was ingrained deep in my bones. Hello, Mike, I answered. Belinda, he said. His voice was serious. I just got an email from your mother, a blast email to all clients announcing the new leadership era at Northlake. It says you are moving on to pursue other opportunities. That is correct, I said. Today is my last day. Is that why the renewal contract has been sitting on my desk for 2 weeks without a countersign? He asked. I could not sign it, Mike, I said. I did not have the authority anymore. There was silence on the line. Then Mike spoke, his voice lower, more personal. Listen to me, Belle. I have been in this business for 30 years. I have seen vendors come and go. I do not sign contracts with buildings. I do not sign contracts with logos. I sign contracts with people who pick up the phone at 3 in the morning when my trucks are freezing on the highway. I appreciate that. Mike, I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. I am not signing the renewal with Northlake, he said. My heart skipped a beat. Mike, that is a big risk for you. You need the maintenance. I need you, he corrected. So here's the question. Are you really retiring, or are you going to open up a shop somewhere else? I looked at the empty office behind me. I looked at the dark window of Grant's office, where the lights were off because he had gone home at 4 o'clock. I am not retiring, I said. Good, Mike said. Then let me know where you land. My fleet goes where you go. And Belinda. I talked to the guys at Red River Transport and City Construction. They feel the same way. If you leave, there's going to be a caravan following you. I gripped the phone. I will let you know. Mike, give me a week. Take 2, he said. We can hold the trucks together with duct tape until you are ready. I hung up the phone. I walked out to the parking lot. The winter air was biting. But it felt clean. It felt like oxygen. Darlene thought she had banished me to the wilderness. She thought that by taking away the company name, she had taken away my power. She did not understand that the power was never in the sign above the door. The power was in the trust I had built, brick by brick. While she was busy planning parties, I put the box in the passenger seat of my car. I was not unemployed. I was a free agent, and I had just secured the biggest contract in the region without even printing a business card. You wanted the flexibility. Mother, I whispered, starting the engine. Now you are going to see just how flexible I can be. I drove out of the gate, leaving Northlake in the rearview mirror. I did not look back. I had a business to build. Harbor Right Fleet Solutions did not begin in a glass-walled boardroom. It began on a scarred oak dining table in our rental house, amidst a sea of yellow legal pads and half-empty coffee mugs. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony. There was just Tessa, wearing her reading glasses and a pair of oversized sweatpants, staring at a spreadsheet she had built from scratch. We need insurance, she said, tapping the screen with a pen. Liability, workers' compensation, and garage keepers coverage. I found a broker in Knoxville who specializes in small industrial startups. He can get us a policy that is 15% cheaper than the standard rate if we pay the first 6 months up front. I looked at her from across the table. I was used to seeing Tessa grading history essays or planning lesson units. I was not used to seeing her ruthlessly dissecting operational overhead. How do you know what garage keepers coverage is? I asked. I read, she said simply, and I'm good at budgeting. You cannot run a classroom on a public school budget without learning how to squeeze a dollar until it screams. This is the same principle. Belinda, just bigger numbers. We had named the company Harbor Right because I wanted it to sound sturdy, a harbor for the clients who needed safety, and a writer a maker, a builder for the work we actually did. It was solid, it was unpretentious, it was everything Northlake had stopped being. The first week was a lesson in humility. I had no garage, I had no trucks, I had a cell phone and a laptop. I rented a single bay in a defunct transmission shop on the edge of town. The floor was stained with oil from the 1990s, and the heater rattled like a dying lung. But the rent was $1,200 a month. I could afford $1,200. I spent 3 days scrubbing the floors with industrial degreaser while Tessa set up the office, which was a folding table in the corner near the air compressor. We are live, she announced on a Tuesday morning. The website is up. The phone lines are forwarded. We exist. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was not a wrong number. It was Mike Saracen. I heard you found a spot, he said. I have 3 trucks coming off the long haul from Atlanta tomorrow. They need oil, filters, and a DOT inspection. Can you handle them? I looked around the empty, freezing garage. I looked at my single set of tools. Yes, I said. Send them over. When the call ended, I looked at Tessa. We have 3 trucks coming tomorrow. I need a mechanic. Call Miller, she said. Miller is the head mechanic at Northlake. I replied. I cannot poach him. It looks bad. You are not poaching him, Tessa said, pulling up her email. He sent an application through the website at 4 o'clock this morning. People do not apply for jobs at 4 in the morning if they are happy. Belinda, I called Miller. He picked up on the first ring. I heard you are back in the game, he said. His voice sounded tired. I am, I said. But Miller, I cannot pay you what Northlake pays you. Not yet. I can match your hourly rate, but the benefits package is... Developing. I do not care about the benefits, Miller said. I care about my sanity. Grant came into the shop yesterday and told us to stop buying the premium filters because they were hurting the aesthetic of the expense report. He wants us to use the cheap paper ones that clog up after 5,000 miles. I cannot work for a man who treats a diesel engine like a fashion accessory. You have a job if you want it, I said. Start tomorrow. We have 3 trucks. I will be there, he said. By the end of the first month, Harbor Right was not just surviving, it was breathing. We were not rich. In fact, we were barely breaking even, but the atmosphere was electric. There was no Darlene hovering over us, worrying about how the grease stains looked to the neighbors. There was no Grant making impossible promises to clients. There was just the work. Tessa was a revelation. She took over the scheduling with a terrifying efficiency. She color-coded the job board red for urgent, yellow for maintenance, green for ready. She learned the part numbers. She learned the names of every driver. When a driver walked in, she didn't offer them a generic greeting. She asked about their kids or their back pain. She made them coffee that didn't taste like mud. Your wife is terrifying, Miller told me one afternoon as we were torquing the lug nuts on a freight hauler. She knows to the penny how much waste oil we generated this week. She is efficient, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. She is the reason we are not bankrupt, he corrected. While we were building, Northlake was bleeding. Word travels fast in the logistics industry. It is a small world, connected by CB radios and diner counters. The drivers talked. They told stories about the new Northlake. One driver, a regular named Big Jim, sat in our waiting area, which was just 2 plastic chairs, and told us about his last visit to my mother's shop. I had a blown turbo, Jim said, shaking his head. I limped the rig into Northlake. Grant comes out. He's wearing a suit in a grease shop. He looks at the engine and starts talking about synergistic repair protocols. I ask him how long it will take. He says 3 days. 3 days for a turbo swap. You used to do it in 6 hours. What did you do? I asked. I towed it here, Jim said. Grant tried to charge me a consultation fee for looking at it. I told him to send the bill to my lawyer. It was painful to hear. I had built that company. I had trained those people. To watch Grant dismantle it through sheer incompetence was like watching someone crash a car I had lovingly restored. He was trying to run a repair shop like a tech startup, using buzzwords to cover the fact that he did not know how to hold a wrench. But I did not have time to mourn Northlake. I had a war to fight. My mother called me in the 6th week. I was under a chassis, covered in grime. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid out on the creeper and answered. Hello, Mother? Belinda, she said. Her voice was tight, clipped. I just ran into Susan from the bank. She told me you are poaching our clients. I am not poaching anyone, I said, sitting up and wiping the sweat from my forehead. Northlake is a free market entity. Clients can choose where to service their vehicles. If they are coming to me, it is because they want to. It is embarrassing, she snapped. People are talking. They are saying the family is split. They are asking why my daughter is working out of a garage in the industrial district, like a common grease monkey. I am a grease monkey. Mother, I said calmly, that is how I paid for your kitchen renovation. Remember? Do not be snippy, she said. You are making us look desperate. Grant is trying to secure a line of credit for the expansion, and it does not help that you are out there undercutting us. You need to stop. You are damaging the family brand. I stood up. I looked at Tessa, who was on the phone with a parts supplier, negotiating a discount with a smile on her face. I looked at Miller, who was whistling as he worked. This was not a garage. This was a home. Mother, I said, you told me at Christmas that I did not fit in. You said I was not polished enough for your table. You said Tessa was too poor to be seen. Do you remember? That was a social gathering, she said dismissively. This is business. It is all the same to me, I said. You taught me a very valuable lesson. If you do not fit the aesthetic, you should remove yourself. So I did. I removed myself from your company. I removed myself from your life. I am just following your rules. If the clients prefer my garage to your showroom, maybe you should ask yourself why your showroom is so empty. You are ungrateful, she said. After everything I gave you. You gave me a job, I said. I gave you a fortune. I think we are even. I hung up. The growth that followed was not explosive. It was steady, like a rising tide. We did not advertise. We did not need to. The quality of the work was the advertisement. I introduced a new service model, the Harbor Right Guarantee. We offered a fixed-rate monthly maintenance package. Instead of charging for repairs when things broke, we charged a flat fee to keep them from breaking. We did inspections every 2 weeks. We replaced parts before they failed. For the clients, it was a dream. It turned their variable repair costs into a fixed budget item. For us, it provided steady, predictable cash flow. It was a strategy I had proposed to Darlene 3 years ago. She had rejected it because she wanted the big, flashy payouts of major repairs. She didn't understand that steady nickels are better than occasional quarters. By month 3, we had to hire 2 more mechanics. Both were defectors from Northlake. They came to us not just for the money, but for the respect. Then came the moment of panic. I was lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, when a thought hit me like a physical blow. The non-compete clause. Most executive contracts have a non-compete clause that forbids you from opening a similar business within a 50-mile radius for at least a year. In the chaos of leaving, I had assumed I was safe because I had never signed the new contract Grant offered. But what about my original employment agreement? The one I signed 12 years ago. I sat up, my heart hammering. If Darlene found a valid non-compete, she could sue us. She could shut us down. She could take everything. I scrambled out of bed and went to the closet where I kept my old files. I dug through the box marked employment records. I found the original offer letter from 12 years ago. It was a single page, typed by my father before he died. Role junior manager. Salary $30,000. Duties. Whatever needs doing. There was no non-compete. I dug deeper. Surely. Darlene had made me sign something. Later I found the paperwork from when I was promoted to operations manager 5 years ago. It was an email, a simple email from Darlene that said, "Congratulations on the new title. Sweetie, let's keep making this place great." I sat on the floor and started laughing. It was a hysterical, relieved sound. Darlene was so obsessed with the idea that family doesn't need contracts because it allowed her to manipulate me without legal recourse. She thought the lack of paper kept me under her thumb. She thought our blood relation was a binding contract stronger than any law, but that arrogance was a double-edged sword. Because she had never treated me like a real executive. She had never legally bound me like one. She had no non-compete. She had no non-solicitation agreement. She had absolutely nothing. I was free. "What is it?" Tessa asked, waking up and coming into the room. "She forgot to lock the door," I said, holding up the flimsy offer letter. "I can take every client she has, and there is not a single thing she can do about it legally." "Are you going to?" Tessa asked. "I do not have to," I said. "They are walking through the door on their own." Things were going too well. The revenue was up. The team was happy. I was sleeping better than I had in a decade. And then, the phone buzzed. It was a Tuesday evening in late March. We had just closed the shop. I looked at the notification. It was a text from Darlene. My stomach tightened. I expected an insult. I expected a threat. I expected her to scream about the mechanics I had hired. I opened the message. "Hi, Belinda. I was just at the mall and saw a scarf that looked exactly like something Tessa would wear. It is so earthy and authentic. It made me think of you too. I miss you. We should talk soon. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen. Earthy and authentic. Tessa. Love. She had never used the word authentic as a compliment in her life. She had never bought Tessa a gift, and she certainly did not miss me. "What does she say?" Tessa asked, looking over my shoulder. "She is being nice," I said. The blood ran cold in my veins. "Why?" Because Darlene Ashford is never nice unless she wants something, I said. And she is never this nice unless she is desperate. I thought about the rumors I had heard from the suppliers. Northlake was late on payments. The line of credit Grant had applied for had been stalled. She wasn't texting me because she missed her daughter. She was texting me because she had looked at the bank account, and for the first time, she was truly terrified. She needs money, I said. She is circling back. What are you going to do? Tessa asked. I turned off the screen. I am going to wait, I said. If she is complimenting your scarf, it means she is already drowning, and I want to see how long she can tread water before she screams for help. The collapse of Northlake Fleet and Equipment Services did not happen with a single explosion. It happened like a slow leak in a hydraulic line, messy, persistent, and ignored until the pressure dropped to zero and the machine simply refused to lift. By April, the silence from my mother's side of town had been replaced by a cacophony of complaints from the market. I did not have to spy on them. I did not have to ask around. The failures of Northlake were walking through my front door every single day. It started with the parts, a driver from a municipal waste management company, a contract I had held for 8 years, came into Harbor Right with a work order in his hand and a look of absolute disbelief on his face. They put a gasoline filter on a diesel engine, he told me, throwing the crushed filter onto my counter. Grant told me it was a universal fit. It strangled the engine 5 miles down the road. When I called to complain, the receptionist told me Grant was in a meeting and couldn't be disturbed. Grant was not in a meeting, Miller grunted from the back, where he was rebuilding a transmission. Grant was likely hiding in his office because he does not know how to process a refund. That was the pattern. The systems I had built, the automatic reordering, the double-check protocols, the preventative schedules were being dismantled or ignored. Grant viewed them as administrative bloat. He stopped paying the subscription for the inventory software because he thought he could track it in a spreadsheet. Within 3 weeks, they were out of brake pads. Within 6 weeks, they were ordering parts from Amazon because their credit with the major suppliers was frozen due to non-payment. I heard the rumors from the drivers. Nobody answers the phone, they said. I left 3 voicemails and got a text back 3 days later. When confronted with these failures, Grant did not look in the mirror. He looked for scapegoats. I saw him at a local diner one morning. I was picking up breakfast for my crew. He was shouting at someone on his phone in the parking lot. It is the market, he was yelling, his face flushed red. The supply chain is broken. How am I supposed to get parts if China isn't shipping them, and the staff? They are lazy. They don't have the vision. It is not my fault if Belinda took all the competent people and left me with the dregs. He did not see me. He was too busy constructing a reality where he was the victim of a global conspiracy rather than the perpetrator of his own incompetence. Meanwhile, Darlene was engaged in a frantic, manic attempt to pretend the ship was not sinking. Social media became her shield. She posted photos almost daily. Spring gala at the country club, Grant received an award. The award was a participation certificate from a local business mixer, Sunday brunch with the family. But if you looked closely at the photos, you could see the cracks. The gala table was in the back of the room, not the front VIP section she used to command. The family brunch featured store-bought pastries plated on fine china, not the catered spread of years past, and Marissa. Marissa looked furious. In every photo, Marissa's smile was tight, her eyes dead. I knew why. Marissa's affection was directly tied to the credit card limit. I got the confirmation from a friend of mine who worked at the local luxury car dealership. Marissa came in to trade up her SUV, he told me over coffee. She wanted the new model. The financing was declined. Insufficient income verification. She threw a fit in the showroom. Belinda. She screamed at Grant right there in front of the sales team. She asked him why he was the CEO if he couldn't even buy a car. The pressure on Grant must have been suffocating. He was being squeezed by the clients who demanded competence, by the vendors who demanded payment, and by a wife who demanded luxury. But the real blow, the one that made me sit up straight in my chair, came from a casual conversation with a commercial real estate broker named David. David had handled the lease for my new shop. He stopped by Harbor Right to drop off some paperwork. "I see your mom is doubling down," he said casually, looking around my busy garage. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The mortgage," he said. "I saw the filing come through the county clerk's office last week. She leveraged the Northlake building and the land, took out a second line. Pretty aggressive move for a company that has been around that long. Usually, you want to pay that debt down, not double it." My blood ran cold. The Northlake building was the family's safety net. My father had paid it off 20 years ago. It was the one asset that was truly safe. I had explicitly warned Darlene a year ago when she wanted to buy a vacation home that she must never, under any circumstances, leverage the commercial property. It was the only thing that gave the company value if the cash flow dried up. "How much?" I asked. $2 million, David said. "High interest, short term, hard money loan." She had not just borrowed money. She had taken out a loan with predatory terms. She was betting the farm. She was burning the furniture to heat the house. "She is going to lose it," I whispered. "She is going to lose the building." "Well, let's hope Grant has a plan to generate $2 million in 6 months, David said, "because that is when the balloon payment hits." Grant did not have a plan. Grant had a new suit. 2 days later, they showed up. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. Harbor Right was humming. Air wrenches were screaming. The smell of diesel and coffee filled the air, and 3 trucks were lined up in the bay. I was at the front desk, reviewing a contract with a new client. The door opened. The bell chimed. The conversation in the waiting area died instantly. Darlene and Grant walked in. They looked like they were dressed for a funeral or a board meeting at a Fortune 500 company. Darlene wore a Chanel suit that looked slightly tight on her. Grant wore a navy blazer with gold buttons. They stood there, surrounded by drivers in stained work shirts and mechanics covered in grease. They looked ridiculous. They looked obsolete. I finished my conversation with the client, signed the paper, and shook his hand. Then, I turned to them. "Hello? Mother? Grant?" "Belinda," Darlene said. She forced a smile, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were darting around the shop, taking in the activity, the noise, the sheer volume of business I was conducting. "This is quaint?" "It is productive," I said. "What can I do for you?" "We need to talk," Grant said. He tried to sound commanding, but his voice cracked slightly. "In private?" "I do not have a private office," I said, gesturing to the open floor plan. "We can talk here." "Here," Darlene whispered, clutching her pearls. "In front of these people." "These people are my clients and my team," I said. "I have nothing to hide from them. If you want to talk, talk." Darlene stiffened. She looked at Grant. Grant took a deep breath, adjusting his cuffs. "Look, Belle," Grant started. "We have been thinking, this rivalry, it is silly. It is hurting the family. We are splitting the market share when we should be dominating it." "I am dominating it," I said. "You are losing it. There is a difference." "We want to offer you a merger," Darlene interrupted. "We want to bring you back into the fold." "A merger," I repeated. "Yes," she said, gaining confidence. "We combine operations. You bring your little shop back to Northlake. We have the facility. We have the brand name. You take over the operations department again. You run the floor. Grant will remain CEO, of course, to handle the corporate strategy, but we will give you a raise, a significant one." I stared at them. They were offering me the exact same deal I had rejected in January. They wanted me to be the engine again. They wanted me to come back, fix the mess Grant had made, generate the cash to pay off the loan they had secretly taken, and let Grant take the credit. "Let me get this straight," I said, leaning against the counter. "You want me to close my profitable business, fire my staff, or integrate them into a toxic environment, and come work for you as an employee so I can save you from the debt you just took out on the building?" Grant's eyes widened. "How did you know about the debt?" "I know everything. Grant, I said. I know about the mortgage. I know about the parts shortages. I know about the drivers you alienated. I know Marissa's credit was declined. We are family, Darlene cried out, her voice shrill, cutting through the noise of the shop. Doesn't that mean anything to you? We are talking about your father's legacy. We are talking about your nephew. Do you want little Leo to grow up without a legacy because you were too stubborn to help? Do not use Leo as a shield, I said. It is Christmas all over again, Darlene said, her eyes filling with tears that might have been real or might have been performance art. You are punishing us because of one mistake, one party. Belinda. Are you going to destroy the family over a dinner invitation? It wasn't a mistake. Tessa's voice cut through the air. I turned. Tessa had come out of the stockroom. She was holding a clipboard. She was wearing jeans and a Harbor Right polo shirt. She walked up to the counter and stood next to me. Darlene looked at Tessa. For the first time, she did not look at her with disdain. She looked at her with fear. Tessa, Darlene said, please, talk some sense into her. You did not forget to invite us, Tessa said. Her voice was calm, low, and incredibly heavy. You sat down, you discussed it, you weighed the options, and you decided that my presence was less valuable than your reputation. Darlene stammered. You chose not to invite, Tessa continued, her eyes locking onto Darlene's. So you also chose the consequences. You cannot throw someone out of the house and then demand they come back to fix the roof when it starts raining. The silence in the shop was absolute. Even the air wrenches had stopped. Grant looked at the floor. Darlene looked at me. Her face pale. The family card had been played, and it had been trumped by the truth. I am not coming back, I said. Not as an employee, not as a partner, not as a savior. Northlake is your ship. You steered it, you can sail it, or you can sink with it. Darlene's shoulders sagged. The pretense dropped. She looked 10 years older than she had when she walked in. We are going to lose the building, she whispered. It was the first honest thing she had said in months. The bank, the balloon payment. We can't make it. The cash flow is gone. I know, I said. Help us, she pleaded. Not for Grant, for me. I am your mother. I cannot fix the business, Mother, I said. It is broken beyond repair. Then help me with the bank, she said. A desperate light came into her eyes. I have a meeting on Friday, with the loan committee. If I can show them we have a plan, if I can show them I have backing. You do not have backing, I reminded her. I could, she said. She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold. Come to the meeting. Just come with me. You do not have to put money in. Just be there. Let them see you. Let them see that the family is united. If they see you, they will extend the term. They trust you. Belinda, they always asked for you. You want me to use my reputation to underwrite your bad debt. I want you to sign a character affidavit, she said. Just a paper saying you are involved, that you are advising us. It is just a formality. If you sign it, they will give us 6 months. That is all I need. 6 months to turn it around. I looked at her hand on mine. I looked at Grant, who was watching me with the hunger of a drowning man looking at a life raft. They wanted one signature, just one little lie to the bank to buy them time. I thought about the $10 million in liquid capital sitting in my Harbor Right acquisition account money I had secured from an angel investor group just last week to expand our operations. Money they knew nothing about. I thought about the too poor comment. A meeting, I said slowly. Yes, Darlene said. Friday at 2:00, First National. I will come, I said. Grant exhaled loudly. Thank God. But, I added, pulling my hand away from hers, I am not promising to sign anything. I will come. I will listen, and I will decide. That is all I ask, Darlene said. She straightened her jacket, trying to regain some dignity. You will see. We just need time. We can fix this. They walked out of the shop. They walked out thinking they had won a reprieve. They walked out thinking I was the dutiful daughter coming to save the day. They did not know that I was not going to the bank to save them. I turned to Tessa. "Get the financial statements ready," I said, "and call the bank. Tell them I will be attending the meeting on Friday." "What are you going to do?" Tessa asked. "She wants me to show the bank where the value is," I said. "I am going to show them exactly that." "You are going to let them fail," Tessa said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "Failing is passive. I am going to foreclose." The condition I set for my attendance at the bank meeting was simple, but to my mother, it must have felt like a hostage negotiation. I told her I would not walk into First National Bank alone. I would be accompanied by Marcus Thorne, my attorney, and I required full access to the loan documents 48 hours prior to the meeting. "A lawyer," Darlene had sputtered over the phone. "Belinda, this is a friendly meeting. We are just asking for an extension. Bringing a lawyer makes it look adversarial." "It is a business transaction involving millions of dollars," I replied, my voice devoid of the warmth she was desperately trying to kindle. "If you want me there to provide credibility, then you have to accept my due diligence. Take it or leave it." She took it. She had no choice. On Wednesday afternoon, a courier delivered a thick, heavy box of financial records to Harbor Right. It was the disclosure package prepared for the bank. I took it home. That evening, while Tessa cooked dinner, I sat at the dining table and performed an autopsy on the company I had spent my life building. It was worse than I thought. I knew they were bleeding cash. I had known about the second mortgage, but as I turned the pages of the general ledger, tracing the flow of capital over the last 6 months, I realized that Northlake was not just failing, it was being looted. "Look at this," I said to Tessa, sliding a spreadsheet across the table. She wiped her hands and leaned over. "What am I looking at?" "The marketing and client relations budget," I said. "In the last quarter alone, they spent $80,000. "On what?" Tessa asked. "They haven't run a single ad. Their website is still broken." "On executive retention," I said, pointing to the line items. There were charges for a strategic retreat at a 5-star resort in Aspen. There were invoices from a high-end interior design firm for home office ergonomics, which I knew for a fact was the renovation of Grant's home study. There were leased luxury vehicles listed as site inspection units. They had taken the loan money the money meant to keep the business alive, and they had spent it on maintaining the illusion that they were successful. They had bought the costume of a CEO instead of doing the job of a CEO. "They are not just incompetent," Tessa said quietly. "This borders on embezzlement." "It is not embezzlement because they own the company," I said, rubbing my temples. "But it is gross mismanagement, and the bank is going to see this. The loan officer isn't stupid. They are calling the loan because they can see the money isn't going into the trucks. It is going into Grant's lifestyle." I closed the binder. A cold fury was settling in my chest. Darlene wanted me to go to that meeting to charm the loan committee. She wanted me to use my reputation, my name, which was synonymous with reliability in this town, to convince the bankers that this spending was just a temporary hiccup. She wanted me to co-sign her delusion. "I cannot save them," I said. "Even if I wanted to, this hole is too deep." "You do not have to save them," Tessa said. She sat down opposite me. "But there are 40 people working in that shop. Belinda, Miller's friends, the guys you trained. If the bank forecloses on Monday, the doors get padlocked. They lose their jobs. They lose their health insurance." That was the trap. Darlene knew my weak spot. She knew I cared about the mechanics. She was holding the employees hostage, betting that I would bail out the family to save the crew. "I have a plan," I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place in my mind. "But it is going to be brutal. It is going to destroy any chance of us ever having a Sunday dinner again." "We already lost Sunday dinner," Tessa reminded me. "Now we are just deciding who cleans up the mess." I pulled out a fresh legal pad. "I am not going to put a dime into Northlake," I said. "I am not going to pay for Grant's Aspen trip, but I will not let the bank auction off the equipment to strangers. I'm going to make an offer to buy the assets, the lifts, the tools, the inventory, and the client list. And the debt? Tessa asked. The debt stays with the entity, I said. The debt stays with Darlene and Grant. I will buy the pieces that work, and I will leave them with the shell they hollowed out. It was a surgical separation. It was the only way to save the jobs without enabling the addiction. Thursday passed in a blur of preparation. I met with Marcus Thorne. He was a sharp man with eyes like flint. When I explained my strategy, he smiled a rare, predatory expression. This is aggressive, Thorne said. You are essentially walking into their rescue meeting and turning it into a liquidation sale. They called me because they wanted a solution, I said. This is the only solution that exists. Make sure you have your evidence ready, Thorne advised. When you refuse to sign the guarantee, your mother will pivot. She will blame you. She will tell the bank that the revenue drop is your fault because you stole the clients. You need to prove that the business left because of their negligence, not your malice. I have the emails, I said. I spent the rest of the afternoon compiling the defense file. It was a stack of emails from clients, from Mike Saracen, from the city fleet manager, from the drivers. Every single one of them stated clearly why they had left Northlake, missed deadlines, incorrect repairs, unprofessional conduct. I was not going to let Darlene rewrite history. That evening, my phone rang. It was Darlene. I almost didn't answer. I was tired. I wanted to sit on the porch with Tessa and drink a glass of wine, but I knew I had to take the call. It was part of the game. Hello, Mother, I said. Belinda, she said. Her voice was soft, almost unrecognizable. It was the voice she used when I was a child and had fallen off my bike. I just wanted to thank you for agreeing to come tomorrow. I know things have been strained. Strained is a polite word for it, I said. I have been doing a lot of thinking, she continued, about Christmas, about what I said. I waited. I was just so stressed, she sighed. You know how it is. The pressure of the holidays. And I was worried. I was worried that people would judge you. I wanted to protect you from their whispers. I didn't want anyone looking at Tessa and making assumptions. It came out wrong. I am sorry if it hurts your feelings. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. She was apologizing for my reaction, not her action. She was framing her cruelty as protection. You were not protecting me, I said calmly. You were protecting your image. Why do you always have to be so cynical? She asked, a hint of the old irritation seeping through. I am trying to make peace. Belinda, we are a family. Tomorrow, when we walk into that bank, we need to be a united front. I need you to show them that we are strong. Can you do that for me? I will be there, I said, and I will be honest. Good, she said, choosing to interpret that as compliance. You know, Grant is really looking forward to working with you again. He thinks that maybe, after this loan is sorted, we can find a way to merge the companies. He has some great ideas about branding. She was already planning the next phase of exploitation. She assumed that once I signed the guarantee, I would be back under her thumb, fixing Grant's messes while he played CEO. Mother, I said, before we go tomorrow, I need to ask you one thing. Anything, sweetie. Do you remember when you said Tessa looked too poor to be at the party? There was silence. Belinda, please, let's not dwell on the past. I am not dwelling, I said. I am clarifying. You said you were afraid people would judge, but the only person who judged us was you. You taught everyone else how to treat us. You set the standard. And tomorrow, you are going to see what happens when people finally stop following your lead. I don't know what you mean, she said nervously. You will, I said. Get some sleep. Mother, you are going to need it. I hung up. I looked at Tessa. She was standing in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. She tried the "I was protecting you" speech. Tessa asked. Word for word, I said. And I realized I don't hate her, I said, taking the glass. I just pity her. She is about to walk into a buzzsaw, and she thinks she is walking into a tea party. The morning of the meeting arrived with a gray, drizzling sky. It was fitting weather for a funeral. I dressed with deliberate care. For years, I had dressed to disappear. I wore functional slacks and polo shirts because my job was to be invisible. Today, I dressed to be seen. I wore a tailored charcoal suit that I had bought specifically for this occasion. It was sharp, expensive, and intimidating. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I did not look like the director of internal logistics. I looked like the owner of Harbor Right Fleet Solutions. Tessa straightened my lapel. "Remember," she said, "you are not taking revenge. You are taking inventory." "I know," I said. "And Belinda," she looked me in the eye, "do not let them make you feel small. You are the biggest thing in that room." I drove to First National Bank. I parked my car, my practical, reliable sedan, next to Darlene's Mercedes. They were waiting for me in the lobby. Darlene was wearing a pastel pink suit, trying to project an air of soft, non-threatening femininity. Grant was pacing, checking his watch. When they saw me, relief washed over their faces. "Oh, thank goodness," Darlene said, rushing over to hug me. I stood stiffly, not returning the embrace. "You look professional." "Hello, Mother," I said. Marcus Thorne stepped up beside me. He was carrying a leather briefcase. "Who is this?" Grant asked, looking at Thorne with suspicion. "This is Marcus Thorne," I said. "My legal counsel." "I told you not to bring a lawyer," Darlene hissed, her smile vanishing. "It sends the wrong message." "Mr. Thorne is here to ensure that my interests are protected," I said. "Shall we go in?" "Fine," Darlene snapped. "But let me do the talking. You just nod and agree when I talk about the restructuring plan." We walked into the conference room. The bank's team was already seated. There were 3 of them: the loan officer, a man named Henderson, whom I had known for years, the branch manager, and a woman I didn't recognize, likely from the risk assessment department. They looked serious. There were no donuts on the table. "Mrs. Ashford," Henderson said, nodding to Darlene. "Grant, Belinda." "Hello, Jim," Darlene said, turning on the charm like a light switch. "Thank you so much for seeing us. I know there have been some concerns about the metrics this quarter, but I brought the whole team today to assure you that we are on track." She gestured to me as if I were a prop. "Belinda has been consulting with us on the operational side," Darlene lied smoothly, "and we have a very aggressive strategy to recapture the market share in Q3. Henderson looked at me. His expression was unreadable. "That is good to hear," he said, "because, frankly, Mrs. Ashford, the bank's position is precarious. The covenants on the loan have been breached. The debt service coverage ratio is below 1.0. Technically, we are in a position to demand immediate repayment." Darlene laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "Oh, Jim, surely that isn't necessary. We have the assets, we have the building, and with Belinda back on board, the revenue is guaranteed." "Right. Belinda," she turned to me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, daring me to contradict her in front of the money. She was banking on my shame. She was banking on the fact that I would never embarrass the family in public. I looked at Henderson, then I looked at Darlene. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single, thin folder. "Actually," I said clearly, "I need to correct the record. I am not back on board. I am not a consultant for Northlake, and I'm not here to guarantee their debt." The room went deadly silent. "Belinda," Darlene gasped. "What are you doing?" "I am here," I continued, ignoring her, "because I have a counter-proposal regarding the disposition of the collateral." I opened the folder. Inside was the proof of funds, $10 million. Darlene saw the number on the top sheet as I slid it toward the banker. Her eyes bulged. She stopped breathing. She looked at the paper to me, and for the first time, she didn't see the daughter she had forgotten to invite to Christmas. She saw the shark she had thrown into the water, thinking it would drown, only to realize too late that it had learned how to hunt. "I am not here to save the loan," I said to Henderson. "I am here to buy the equipment when you foreclose." The air in the conference room of First National Bank was not just cold, It was vacuum-sealed, the kind of silence that usually precedes a pronouncement of death. Jim Henderson sat at the head of the polished oak table, his hands clasped over a file that was thick with the evidence of my family's incompetence. To his right, the risk assessment officer, a woman named Ms. Vance, typed silently on her laptop, her eyes darting between the screen and my mother with the detached curiosity of a coroner. Darlene was vibrating with a nervous energy that she was trying desperately to disguise as charm. She adjusted her silk scarf. She smoothed the lapel of her pink suit. She smiled at Jim, a smile that showed too many teeth and reached nowhere near her eyes. "So," Darlene said, breaking the silence with a laugh that sounded like glass shattering, "I know we are here to discuss the extension, and I want to assure you, Jim, that the cash flow issue is temporary, strictly seasonal. We have always paid our debts. You know that. Your father knew my husband. We go back 30 years. Jim Henderson did not smile back. He opened the file in front of him. "Darlene," he said. His voice was gentle but firm, the tone of a man who has to tell a patient that the treatment has failed. "I cannot look at history. I have to look at the numbers, and the numbers are catastrophic." "Catastrophic is a strong word," Grant interjected. Leaning forward, he was trying to look authoritative, but he just looked sweaty. "We have assets. We have the fleet. You have a fleet that is currently operating at 40% capacity due to maintenance backlogs," Ms. Vance said, not looking up from her screen. "And you have a second lien on the property that violates the covenants of our primary mortgage. Technically, Grant, you are in default right now. We do not need to wait for the balloon payment. We could seize the accounts today." Darlene's face went pale. She looked at Jim, betrayal written in the lines around her mouth. "You would not do that," she whispered. "We are Ashfords." "That is why we haven't done it yet," Jim said. "But my hands are tied. Darlene, the risk committee is demanding additional collateral or a full guarantee from a solvent party. We need a cash injection of at least $500,000 immediately to bring the accounts current, and we need a guarantor for the remaining balance of $2 million. The room went quiet again. The number hung in the air. $2.5 million. It was a tombstone. Darlene turned to me. I had been sitting silently at the end of the table, Marcus Thorne beside me. I saw the desperation in her eyes shift into calculation. She looked at my suit. She looked at my calm demeanor. She convinced herself, in that split second, that I was there to play my part. She thought I was the safety net she had kicked away, but who had crawled back to catch her. "Well," Darlene said, her voice gaining a sudden, shaky strength, "that is exactly why Belinda is here." She gestured to me with a flourish, as if unveiling a statue. "Belinda understands the situation," Darlene continued, speaking to the bankers but staring hard at me. "She knows that the family stands together. She has built a very successful little operation of her own, and she is willing to leverage her standing to reassure the bank. Aren't you, Belinda?" Grant looked at me, nodding vigorously. "Right. Belle is going to co-sign. She knows the potential of the company. She knows we just need a bridge." I looked at my mother. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. She was terrified of losing the house, the status, the country club membership, but even in her terror, she could not ask me. She had to command me. She had to frame it as my duty, not her request. "You want me to prove my financial standing?" I asked quietly. "Yes," Darlene said, her eyes widening with relief. "Just show Jim that you have the liquidity to back the guarantee. Show him that the Ashford name is still strong. That is all we need. Sweetie, just a signature to calm everyone down." "It is standard procedure," Jim added, looking at me with a mixture of hope and apology. "If you are acting as the guarantor, Belinda, I need to see proof of funds, something that shows you can cover the exposure if Northlake defaults." "I understand," I said. I stood up. Grant let out a long breath, slumping back in his chair. Darlene closed her eyes for a second, silently thanking a god she only prayed to when she needed money. They thought they had won. They thought the nightmare was over. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. "Can I connect to the screen?" I asked Ms. Vance. "Certainly," she said, sliding an HDMI cable across the table. I plugged it in. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life, mirroring my screen. "I am not here to sign a guarantee," I said, my voice steady and clear in the acoustic dead zone of the room. "And I am not here to bridge the gap for Northlake's mismanagement. I am here to end the ambiguity about who is actually solvent in this family." "Belinda, what are you doing?" Darlene hissed, opening her eyes. "Just sign the paper." "You asked for proof of funds," I said. "This is the current balance of the acquisition account for Harbor Right Fleet Solutions." I tapped the screen. The banking app opened. The biometric login swirled for a second, and then the dashboard appeared. It was not a spreadsheet. It was not a printed document that could be forged. It was a live, secure banking portal. The numbers were in bold, black font against a white background. Total available balance: $10,462,118. The silence that followed was not the silence of a library. It was the silence of a bomb site immediately after the detonation, before the screaming started. Jim Henderson's jaw actually dropped. He blinked, leaning forward, his banker's composure cracking. Ms. Vance stopped typing, but Darlene did not look at the banker. She stared at the screen. She stared at the number. Her lips moved, trying to form the words, trying to make sense of the commas and the zeros. $10 million. She looked at me. Her face was not filled with pride. It was filled with a horror so profound it looked like physical pain. She was looking at the daughter she had dismissed as a worker bee, the daughter she had excluded from the family photo because she didn't fit the aesthetic of wealth, and she was realizing that the aesthetic was a lie, and the worker bee owned the hive. "No," she whispered. That is not real. Is that a glitch?" "It is not a glitch, Mother," I said. "It is capital. It is the result of running a business that services clients instead of servicing an ego." Grant stood up, knocking his chair back against the wall. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "How?" he stammered. His voice was high and thin. "How do you have $10 million? You work in a garage. You fix garbage trucks. We have the contracts. We have the brand." "You had the contracts," I corrected him. "You lost them. I picked them up, and I didn't spend the profit on trips to Aspen or renovations for my study. I reinvested it, and last week, I secured a strategic investment from a private equity group that values competence over lineage." $10 million, Darlene repeated, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She looked down at her hands, her manicured, jeweled hands that were currently holding the steering wheel of a bankrupt company. Then she looked at me, and then the memory hit her. I saw it land. I saw the moment she remembered the phone call on Christmas Eve. I saw the moment she heard her own voice saying, "She looks too poor." "You called Tessa poor," I said softly. The room was so quiet that everyone heard it. "You said you didn't want her at the party because she looked like she didn't belong. You were worried about what the neighbors would think." Darlene flinched as if I had slapped her. "Well," I continued, gesturing to the screen where the 8-figure sum was glowing, "Tessa is the CFO of Harbor Right. She manages this account. She manages every dime. The woman you were ashamed of is the reason I am standing here with a war chest, and you are sitting there with a begging bowl." The humiliation was absolute. It stripped her naked in front of the people she wanted to impress. Jim Henderson was looking at Darlene with a new expression, not pity, but a realization of just how far she had fallen. And then, the twist happened. Darlene Ashford was a survivor. She was a creature of pure self-preservation. When the shame became too much to bear, she simply discarded it and replaced it with a desperate, clawing sycophancy. Her face crumpled. Tears real. Panicked tears spilled over her cheeks. She reached out across the table, knocking over a water bottle in her haste to grab my hand. "Oh, Belinda," she sobbed. "Oh, my God. I didn't know. I had no idea you were doing so well. I am so proud of you." I pulled my hand back. "Don't," I said. "No, really," she cried, standing up and coming around the table. "You have done it. You saved the legacy. I knew you had it in you. I always told Grant. Didn't I?" I said, "Belinda is the smart one. Belinda is the one who knows the value of $1. She was rewriting history in real time. It was nauseating. "And Tessa," she babbled, wiping her eyes. "Oh, I have been so awful to her. I see that now. The stress. It made me blind. But she is part of this family. She is my daughter-in-law. We need to make this right. We need to celebrate. You two can come over for dinner tonight. I will cook whatever she wants. We can sit down and figure out how to put this money to work for the whole family." She reached for me again. Her eyes locked on the screen behind me. She wasn't seeing me. She was seeing the liquidity. She was seeing the $10 million as a solution to her mortgage, her car payments, her social standing. She thought that if she said the word family enough times, the money would transfer by osmosis. "We can merge," Grant said, catching on, a desperate smile forming on his face. "Yes, a merger Northlake and Harbor Right. We become a conglomerate. You can be CEO. Belle, I will step down. I will be your VP. Whatever you want, just pay off the lien." I looked at them. They were pathetic. They were willing to sell their pride, their titles, and their past insults for a check. "Sit down," I said. The command was sharp. It stopped Darlene in her tracks. She looked at me, confused by the lack of warmth in my voice. "But, sweetie." "Sit down," I repeated. She sat. She sank into the chair, looking small and fragile in her pink suit. I turned to Jim Henderson. "Jim," I said, "I want to be very clear. The funds you see on this screen are not available for Northlake. I will not sign a guarantee. I will not pay off their lien. I will not cover their overdraft." Darlene let out a strangled sound, a gasp that was half sob, half scream. "Belinda, you can't let them take the house." "I am not giving you the money," I said to her, "because if I give you the money, you will burn it just like you burned the last $2 million. You don't need a bailout. Mother, you need an eviction." "I am your mother," she shrieked. The mask was gone again. "I gave you life, you owe me." "I owed you respect," I said. "And I gave you that for 30 years until you threw it away on Christmas Eve." I turned back to the banker. "However," I said to Jim, "I am aware that Northlake possesses certain assets that are valuable, the equipment, the facility itself, and the few remaining staff members who haven't quit yet." I signaled to Marcus Thorne. He opened his briefcase and slid a document across the table to Jim. "This is a letter of intent," I said. "Harbor Right Fleet Solutions is prepared to purchase the assets of Northlake Fleet and Equipment Services from the bank, contingent on your foreclosure." Grant stood up again. "You are buying us out." "No," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I am not buying you out. I am buying the things you broke. I am offering the bank a cash settlement to take the assets off their books once they seize them from you. You get nothing. The equity is gone. The name is gone." "You can't do that," Grant whispered. "That is theft." "That is business," I said. "You told me the market was tough. Grant, you were right." I looked at Darlene. She was shaking. She realized finally that there was no negotiation. There was no family rate. "I will offer one concession," I said, "because I am not cruel." Darlene looked up, a tiny spark of hope reigniting. "I will buy the building," I said, "and I will allow you to live in the residential property that is attached to the deed the guest cottage. You can stay there rent-free for 1 year, but the main house, the one with the grand foyer where you took that picture." I leaned closer. "That becomes the new corporate headquarters for Harbor Right." Darlene put her head in her hands and began to weep. It wasn't the polite crying of a victim. It was the ugly, heaving sobbing of someone who realizes they have dug their own grave and handed the shovel to their executioner. "Those are my conditions," I said to Jim Henderson. "You foreclose, I bought it, the debt is settled. My mother has a roof over her head, which is more than she offered me on Christmas. And the employees keep their jobs. Jim looked at the document. He looked at the proof of funds on the screen. He looked at the weeping woman and the silent, stunned son. He picked up his pen. "It seems," Jim said, "that we have a path forward." The silence in the conference room was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of a surrender treaty being drafted on a battlefield. Jim Henderson, the bank officer, had his pen poised over the document Marcus Thorne had slid across the mahogany table. The document was a lifeline for the bank and a death sentence for the Ashford family legacy, at least the version of it that Darlene had tried so desperately to curate. I remained standing. I did not want to sit down. Sitting implied we were equals negotiating a deal. We were not equals. I was the buyer, and they were the distressed inventory. "Let us be clear about the terms," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy air. "I am purchasing the physical assets of Northlake. The trucks, the lifts, the diagnostic computers, and the client contracts that have not already expired. I am paying fair market value for these items. That money will go directly to the bank to satisfy the outstanding principal on the loans." "And the building?" Jim asked, looking at the paperwork. "I am purchasing the commercial deed," I confirmed. "The proceeds from that sale will cover the second lien Darlene took out. Whatever is left over, if anything is left over, goes to the Ashfords. But based on my calculations of their current debt load, the net result will be zero. They walk away debt-free, but they walk away with nothing else." Grant slammed his hand on the table. It was a weak, petulant gesture. "You are stealing my company," he shouted. His face was blotchy, sweat beading on his forehead. "You are taking advantage of a temporary cash flow problem to steal what Dad built. This is revenge. Belinda, pure and simple. You are doing this because you are angry about a party." I looked at my brother. He looked like a child wearing a man's suit, terrifyingly unequipped for the reality of the adult world. "Revenge is emotional, Grant," I said calmly. "Revenge is slashing tires. Revenge is posting vague insults on social media. This is not revenge. This is a liquidation. You drove the car into a wall. I am just the one paying for the tow truck, so the wreckage does not block the road for everyone else." "It is hostile," Darlene cried out. She was clutching her purse as if I were about to snatch it. "You are stripping us of our dignity." "I am stripping you of your delusions," I corrected her. "There is a difference, and there is one more condition before I sign anything." I nodded to Marcus. He pulled a second document from his briefcase. It was thinner, just 3 pages, but the language inside was ironclad. "This is a non-interference and non-disparagement agreement," I said. "It states that neither Darlene Ashford nor Grant Ashford will have any role, advisory or otherwise, in the new entity. You will not contact my clients, you will not speak to my employees, and you will not, under any circumstances, attempt to leverage my name or my company's reputation to secure future credit." Darlene gasped. "You are banning us from our own business." "It is not your business anymore," I said. "And more importantly, you will not smear me. You will not tell the country club that I stole the company. You will not tell the cousins that I am the ungrateful daughter. If you do, the clause activates, and I will sue you for the damages. And since I now know exactly what your assets are worth, I know I can win." "I won't sign that," Grant said, crossing his arms. "I have a reputation in this industry." "Your reputation in this industry is that you put a gasoline filter on a diesel engine," I said brutally. "If you do not sign, I walk. The bank is foreclosed tomorrow. They auction the equipment for pennies on the dollar. You still owe the debt. You lose the house, you lose the cars, you lose everything. Sign the paper, Grant, and you get to keep the guest cottage and your personal vehicle. Do not sign it, and you are homeless by Tuesday." Grant looked at Jim Henderson. Jim did not look sympathetic. He looked like a man who wanted his money back. "I would advise you to sign," Jim said dryly. "It is the only offer on the table." Darlene was trembling. She looked small. The pink suit, which had seemed so tactical an hour ago, now looked like a costume from a play that had been canceled. "I just wanted us to be a family," she whispered. Her voice trembled with a weaponized fragility. "I just wanted everyone together at Christmas. That is all I ever wanted. Belinda, why do you have to be so cruel? Can't we just find a way to be together?" She was doing it again. She was trying to pull the emotional lever, hoping that the daughter who used to crave her approval was still in the room. She was hoping that if she said the word family enough times, I would soften, I would write a check, I would let them keep their pride. I looked at her. I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. There was just clarity. "A family does not treat its members like disposable staff," I said. "You did not want a family, Mother. You wanted an audience. You wanted props for your photo, and when one of the props didn't fit the set design, you threw it in the trash. You do not get to ask for a reunion just because you need a loan." "But I am your mother," she pleaded. "Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counts for the fact that I am buying the building so you have a place to sleep," I said. "That is what it counts for. That is the return on your investment." Darlene looked down at the table. She was weeping softly now, but no one moved to comfort her. Grant was staring at the wall, defeated. Then, for the first time in the entire meeting, Tessa moved, my wife, who had stood silently by my side, who had endured the insults, the exclusion, and the contempt, stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not look angry. She looked calm, radiating the kind of dignity that Darlene could not buy with all the credit in the world. "Mrs. Ashford," Tessa said. Darlene looked up, startled. She looked at Tessa as if seeing her for the first time. "You do not have to worry about me," Tessa said. "I know you think I am the reason Belinda changed. You think I poisoned her against you, but I didn't." She paused, her hand resting gently on the table. "I don't need your apology." Tessa continued. "And I certainly do not need your invitation to dinner. I never needed your money, and I never needed your validation. I just needed you to stop hurting the person I love. That is all. If you sign that paper, you stop hurting her. And that is the only Christmas gift I will ever ask from you." Darlene stared at Tessa. In that moment, the dynamic shifted permanently. Darlene realized that the woman she had called too poor possessed a wealth of character that the Ashfords had bankrupted themselves trying to fake. Darlene picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. She signed the non-interference agreement. She signed the sale of assets. She signed the deed transfer. Grant followed. He signed with an angry scratch of the pen, throwing it down when he was finished. "Done," Jim Henderson said. Exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for an hour, he gathered the papers quickly, as if afraid they might turn into smoke. "The bank accepts the settlement. The foreclosure is halted. The assets transfer to Harbor Right Fleet Solutions effective immediately." It was over. I looked at the stack of papers. I had just spent a fortune. I had taken on the responsibility of 40 employees. I had bought a building I had walked out of in tears 3 months ago, but I felt lighter than air. "Thank you, Jim," I said. I turned to my mother and brother. They were sitting in the ruins of their ego. Grant was slumped in his chair. Darlene was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, already beginning the mental gymnastics required to spin this as a victory to her friends. "You can stay in the guest cottage," I repeated, "but the keys to the main office need to be on my desk by Monday morning. Miller will be doing a walkthrough to inventory the equipment. Do not remove anything that is listed on the asset sheet. You are treating us like tenants," Grant spat. "You are tenants," I said. "And I am the landlord. Pay the rent on time, or the eviction notice will be real next time." Darlene stood up. She looked at me, and for a fleeting second, the mask dropped completely. There was no motherly affection, no feigned pride. There was just the cold, hard realization that she had lost control. She looked at me not as her daughter, but as a stranger who had bested her. "You have changed," she said. It was an accusation. "No, Mother," I said. "I haven't changed. I am the same person who fixed your cars, managed your books, and solved your problems for 20 years. You just never bothered to look at me long enough to see who I was. I picked up my bag. I felt Tessa's hand slide into mine. It was warm and solid. You forgot me at Christmas, I said, delivering the final truth that closed the door on our past. You thought I would fade away because you stopped looking at me, but today, I remembered my value, and I made sure the bank remembered it too. I turned my back on them. I did not wait for a response. There was nothing left to say. The transaction was complete. Belinda and Tessa walked out of the conference room. We walked through the hushed lobby of the bank. We walked out the double glass doors and into the gray afternoon light. The air smelled of rain and pavement. It was not a glamorous setting. There were no fireworks. There was no applause. But as we stepped onto the sidewalk, I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the oxygen of absolute freedom. I looked at Tessa. She squeezed my hand. We have a lot of work to do on Monday, she said. Yes, I said, a small smile touching my lips. We have a fleet to run. I did not look back at the bank. I did not look back at the Mercedes parked next to my sedan. I opened the car door for my wife, the woman who was too poor for the Ashfords but rich enough to own their legacy, and we drove away, leaving the ghosts of my family in the rearview mirror, exactly where they belonged. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Belinda's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.